Hello and welcome to Navigating to Success. I'm your host, Jeff Carlton, and I am joined today by Steve Apgar of Apgar Ambulance, who has a incredible background in emergency management, emergency response in Montana and other places that he's going to tell us about. And he is started a very interesting niche market entrepreneurship that he will tell us about as we explore his journey of creating Apgar Ambulance. So I will toss the ball to Steve and let him tell us what Apgar Ambulance is and what they do.
Apgar Ambulance is a multi-state organization. Even though we're based in Montana, we, over the last several years, have handled several states, especially those that don't have a formal dealership. That came about primarily as a result of my experience. I was going on to almost 27 years selling ambulances, both online on my online website, which is ambulancetrader.com, and also through my own limited liability corporation based at one time in Wyoming and Montana, both. What we do now is we represent four major ambulance manufacturers, much like you would be a Ford dealership licensed by Ford. We're licensed by Braun, Demers, and Crestline to sell their particular brands of ambulances. Again, this year we put trucks in Alaska, Washington State, Oregon, but primarily Montana. The ambulance industry has been virtually recession proof. And when I first looked at that as a possibility, I wasn't chosen for my sales ability so much as I was chosen because at one point, right in high school, I became an emergency medical technician. And somewhere on my resume, which was sent to a major ambulance manufacturer in 1995, it indicated that I had not only 5 years experience as an EMT on an ambulance in Columbia Falls, Montana, small town EMT, but that I'd taken the skills learned in EMS and then transferred them to both the police department and later my 13 years as a state trooper. So even though the EMS skills were there, rather than lose those, I told the Highway Patrol that I would be more than happy to continue educating in the areas of first aid, first responder, because all of the state troopers are required to have an annual refresher. So I kept that skill set and made a decision after 13 and a half years with the State Patrol that it was time to get into a profession that allowed me more control. State patrols and police organizations are awfully rigid. They are not really looking for someone with fresh new ideas so much as they are looking for someone that can follow orders and do that. And I kind of felt like it was time for me to make an end run decision at about 30, probably 35 years of age to see what it was going to take to at least produce reasonable success. So from that point, I sent in a resume from the early country morning radio station that I was working in at that time in Buffalo, Wyoming. I had the morning show, and I happened to have a resume on me that day because I was sending in a resume to the state of Wyoming to teach mass casualty incidents and a beginning course in emergency management. I was then the emergency manager for that county in the state and the county fire warden. The resume hit Florida, and I got a call within 24 hours saying, "You're exactly the kind of person we like to hire with your EMS background." So I started selling brand new ambulances in North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, and Wyoming. I spent 12 and a half years working as a commissioned sales rep for one of the world's largest ambulance companies, eventually teaching ambulance sales in my 6-state region, which was comprised mostly of the Northwest. I was dramatically fired by the company president because he did not feel that I should have opened up my own private website. What I did is about 3 years in, I had two really talented younger brothers who have been pioneers in the internet business. They took their business from Kalispell, Montana, and opened up one of the first cyber cafes in Seattle. And by luck's draw, their older brother, the retired highway patrolman, was in the ambulance business, and one of the first questions I ask is, I've been offered some websites. Should I buy them? And my little brother said, well, what are they? And I said, well, they're ambulancetrader.com. He said, oh, God, that's a great name, Ambulance Trader. I said, well, I also bought Police Car Trader and Fire Truck Trader, and also am trying to find and buy useambulance.com. My brother quickly said, buy them all. I said, well, whoa, wait a minute. I said, they're going to cost me $16,000, but I've made an agreement with the gentleman that owns them that I'll give him $6,000 right away, and we'll pay the remainder off. He buy them all. And I said, okay, I'll buy them all. So I picked those domain names up, and quickly realized that Ambulance Trader was the only one that I really wanted to be involved with. AmbulanceTrader.com was basically some old software that allow you to place advertising on a site and get an international and national audience for your pre-owned ambulances.
So
The
kind of
problem
like
was,
a Craigslist.
yeah, the beginning of a Craigslist. It was a crude amount of software. My brother basically designed the site along with his wife, and they helped me out by getting me started. And the next thing my other brother said was, well, you realize, Steve, that you're going to have to give away free advertising on the site for anybody that wants to sell their ambulance for probably 3 to 4 years. And I said, did you not hear the part where I spent 1,600 or 1,000 some dollars per website? Anyway, it was $16,000. So I said, Tyler, did you not hear the part where I spent $16,000 and now you're saying I'm going to give this away free? They gave me some great advice. They reminded me in Seattle that at that time they were looking at a company called eBay, which was losing money. They were looking at the early Amazon.com, which was losing money. And they said, every one of these sites is going to be a big deal, we think, but you have to offer it for free, because until you get a robust, strong website, you don't have anything to offer. So I took their advice, and I gave free advertising away on the site for probably close to 4 years before then I opened it up to paid advertising. By that time, I had enough dealers that I'd visited with that they knew that they could quickly sell their trade-ins, and that it was the only spot at one point early on in my internet days where you would just literally type in used ambulance, and all my traffic and my meta tag words were going to that site. So that developed into not only a huge site for advertising pre-owned ambulances, but it also gave me many opportunities to buy them outright. Basically, you're the guy on the car lot that has the gentleman drive in with the 5-year-old Lexus that's in really great condition, and you're the only one that has it. I had been, as a highway patrolman, I used to scout all the car lots and talk with car dealers because I was very much into automobiles. And every one of the Montana dealers I talked to said, yes, it's true. We do just okay selling brand new vehicles, but that is nowhere near where our profit is. Our profit is almost always in the 5 to 6, 7-year-old vehicles that are low mileage and in clean condition. No one else has those. You can buy your F-150 Ford pickup from any dealership of the 27 I think there are in Montana. But if you want a beautiful pre-owned 3-year-old truck that is a particular color, it may be the dealership in Columbus, Montana might be the only one that has that. So I took that bit of lesson and started buying and trading pre-owned ambulances. If a small town in Wyoming had one, I would oftentimes make no money on the sale of the new one because I would offer them, $7,000 to $10,000 on their trade-in and still pay my company the full price for the ambulance. But probably one of the first deals I did produced almost $12,000 profit in a single sale. It all happened in about a 7 to 10 day period of time when a Montana customer called. And from that very first sale, I quickly realized that in one 7-day job, I had produced half or 6 months of a wage that I would have gotten as a highway patrol officer. So it didn't take me long to realize that if I could do that more often, I was going to make a whole lot more than a security guard or a radio station, person. So that's where it really took off, because not only did I have the ability to give them brand new ambulances, but oftentimes their four-wheel drives almost exclusively are wanted anywhere in the world. So from that step, I was starting to take in every four-wheel drive I could get a bargain on or make some money on. And I eventually partnered with a California firm whose job was to purchase all of the federal government's ambulances, which were automatically traded off. The federal government back then said if an ambulance is 7 years old, it's automatically sent to auction, or if it reaches 100,000 miles, it's automatically sent to auction. So I started becoming a salesman for a gentleman who was a great mechanic, and he really knew how to furbish trucks, but he was a horrible salesman. So I said, well, I'll take care of it. I'll sell every one you get. And over the course of the years that we did that, I counted, I personally purchased 174 federal ambulances and put them everywhere from a diamond mine in the northern Yukon to a coal mine in British Columbia, a copper mine in Peru. My trucks went to the Dominican Republic, Australia, because we learned that a lot of companies around the world started hearing that I was providing ambulances for the big coal mines down in Wyoming. And that's a very small group of mining rescue teams that say, hey, we're over here in the Singapore, or we're over down here in South Africa in a diamond mine, but our laws and your laws both require that we have an ambulance on site if we have more than a set number of employees. So that became not only a real fun job, but I had something no one else had. I had 7 to 10-year-old ambulances, extremely low mileage, that I could sell for probably 1/4 the cost of a new one. Back then, a new Type 1 four-wheel drive was 100,000, whereas I could sell you a equally perfectly suitable truck that's 7 years old, and I could sell it for 35. So that's also one of those side things that gets going. Needless to say, when you start making more money than the corporation that hired you expect you to make, that's not always something that corporations like. So I was basically called and said, hey, because of your other side business, we're just going to let you go. That was after, I think, 12 and a half years, and I'd sold around $14 million worth of ambulances, brand new one. So that happened, and I was called up by another corporation called MedTech within 5 days, and they said, okay, great, they let you go. We're great with that. Well, you can go ahead and go to work and sell trucks for us. So within 5 days of being let go by one corporation, another corporation picked me up, and I became an independent dealer instead of a commission salesperson. And if there's any lesson that I learned, it's that you can make $25,000 at that time as a commission salesperson and have all your expenses taken care of. But I sold almost the exact same amount of ambulances that following year after being let go, and I netted closer to 147,000 after all expenses and everything. So I remind people that are corporate manufacturer representatives that you're going the safe route, because you will get a paycheck every 2 weeks. But if you become an independent dealer, I can almost guarantee you will make 4 and possibly 5 times as much actual money. And that's allowed me to give some good advice to other young people coming up in the business, including a fellow that now helps me out in Arkansas and Oklahoma. He was a young man, probably 15 years younger than me. And I told him my experience, and I said, as much as you're having fun and you're enjoying the safety of getting paid every 2 weeks, I'm going to tell you, sir, that you will make probably 4 times that money if you can get independent and become an independent dealer. It's somewhat like a franchisee, but a lot of car dealers don't depend on anything from the factory but incentives and inventory. And that's a whole lot different than being a paid car salesman. So that's been a big part of my program too.
two two things that struck me as you were taking us through that part of your journey was adaptability, which you certainly saw adaptability, but I think your decisions to adapt to a different environment were really based on a risk assessment and your personal and financial risks that you took along that way. What kind of what went into the soup, if you will, um, and how do you assess risk?
Um, well, I think it's Buffett or somebody that said there's not going to be any rewards at all if you don't take some risks. And my risks started out real small. I'll never forget that I had a used, probably 11-year-old Lexus LS sedan that I had bought, and I had paid cash for it because I had cash at that time from several sales that I'd done. And I needed to buy two trucks that were going to be probably costing me somewhere around 30,000 for the pair, but I knew that if I could get them to a detail shop and repair anything, that they would probably double in value from 30 to closer to 55, 60,000. So I went to my local bank and I said, I don't, I need $25,000. And he said, well, I can't just do that. And I said, well, what's it going to take? I said, you have my home mortgage. That's why I came to you as a banker. I said, I need $25,000 cash. And I said, and that's a point too, where you've got to be thinking ahead and saying, hey, look, my car's paid for. He said, really? He said, well, would you surrender your title for the 20, 30 days it's going to take for us to do this deal? I said, obviously, yeah, that car title, you can have that if you'll front me that money. This was at Laramie, Wyoming, back in about 1995, a small First Interstate bank. Well, that young man who even then was younger than me, he was a brand new banker, probably 22 years old, apparently saw something because he gave me that money. And after that, after being able to net 30 and $40,000 on some of these deals, I just made it a point to remember that cash is king, and don't spend that money. Just use it to slowly get to that point where you don't have to finance anything. And that's been an important lesson in my life, is what does money cost you? Does it cost you only giving away your car title a while, or does it end up costing you $28 a day in interest? So I tell people, know what money costs you. It's very rare that I haven't been able to tell my banker, hey, look here, right now I'm paying you $64 a day on this amount of money. So why don't you take the funds in that account, pay that note off? And that's been huge. Not only paying credit card debt down as quickly as possible, um, but also using credit cards. Most of my business involves major purchases. I might do a $6,000 graphics package on a car and an ambulance. I might have to buy a cot and a loading system that might cost as much as $53,000. But I have two credit cards. One's a Marriott, one's a United. I have 1.2 million points on Marriott and a quarter of a million on United. And I rarely end up paying for my entire vacation. And now that my wife and I are looking at more and more fun retirement things, we're very blessed to have been loyal to two companies, three companies. So as you look towards success in retirement, it doesn't hurt that Marriott um, sends you a letter saying, congratulations, Mr. Apgar, you've stayed 204 nights this year for a total of 3,700 nights. You have reached the level of titanium lifetime. What it sounds really important. What it basically means is no matter what, I retain that level, and I'll still continue to build points. So that was another good lesson: is use credit wisely. Don't get in debt with it so much as build interest and build points in it. Um, I look back though and think, as much as I think I'm pretty smart in terms of what I've done, I also had some good breaks. To have two little brothers that understood the internet and knew that it was going to become something. I mean, I'm at a point now where I intend to probably sell some of these domain names and literally move ambulance trader to a younger 23-year-old professional, but it will give me a good retirement income for the next 8 to 10 years, where I am going to be doing fine because I set those businesses up to make money. So
So
that's
let me
been a good
switch gears
lesson.
on you just for a second, because I mean, between radio and highway patrol, EMS, and all the varied things, share with me briefly your philosophy on maintaining a healthy work-life balance. Because you strike me as a guy that probably worked himself to 10 o'clock every night for a period of time. And at some point you shifted into something that was more healthy. And that's something a lot of people struggle with. So how did you, what are your tips and tricks for maintaining that work-life balance?
You're spot on, because there's no question that my early years of almost 20 some years of traveling almost exclusively every week, even if you wanted to go to the factory, you had to sketch out 3 days, because in the days before Zoom inspections, it was one flight from Wyoming or Montana to Orlando, Florida, and then an entire day with customers to look at their ambulance, and then usually a day home. So back then, you were gone all the time. You spent 3 days just to say, here's your truck, take a look. 30 minutes later, the customer would say, it's great, we're going to drive it away, let's go have a drink. I have really embraced Zoom technology and inspections by Zoom, because I used to go to the factories once a month easily. So you're looking at 12 trips a year, 3 days, 3 days each trip, and expensive. It wouldn't be unusual if you want to take your clients out to dinner and get their motel rooms and everything, that you'd have 3 days at $3,000. So over time, I discouraged customers from going to the factory unless they absolutely wanted to go. I did more and more, less work and more consignment to other people. All my ambulances now are fully insured by the carrier. They're put on a flatbed truck after I inspect them visually, and they're driven right to our shop in Kalispell, Montana. There's no need for me to wear myself out. I just turned 66. It's easy at 36, but it becomes not such a fun trip. So I did that to cut down on times, and I also basically over the last 4 years, I don't drive long distances anymore. It was not unusual when I was picking up these trucks to see if I could target an 800-mile day. I can
Wow.
remember several trips where you would leave, Elizabeth, New Jersey, and try to make Council Bluffs, Nebraska, or Iowa, that same 12 or 14-hour period. And not smart, but the more work I could do, the more money I could make, because I couldn't afford to have a carrier pick the truck up even back then, when it was $1,000 to put it on a flatbed and they would insure it. That $1,000, I could keep half of that in my pocket if I did the job myself. So I would say about 5 to 6 years ago, I said, what are you doing that you don't want to do anymore? Long distance driving, uh, basically washing and taking care of these brand new ambulances, and getting them to the Ford dealer or to your own dealer to have all of the graphics put on them. I counted not too long ago, and there are 22 individuals who work for me along with all the other jobs they have that are not related to me. But whether it's a graphics team, or a couple of fellows that bring the ambulances off the trucks and wash them and hook up the batteries, in that whole chain of people, there's about 22 individuals that now do what I used to do to some extent. So it's so much more worth what it might save you than to be able to sit and basically assign everything within an hour every morning. Um, so over the last probably 8 to 10 years, instead of on the road all the time, it's usually a 2 hour day. Early in the morning, 6 o'clock, I'm usually always up at 5:30 with the goal of being completely done by 8:30, so I can get my wife her first cup of coffee and her orange juice and say, okay, what do we do today? Where do we go? So you really
Well,
need to do that, and do
you
it
know,
in your quiet time, because you in Montana and me in a Pacific Standard Time, the factories open up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the east. So if your source is in the east, they'll take your call at 6 o'clock in the morning, and they're more than happy to get things done in their day too. So take advantage of those time zones.
yeah, what I just heard you say, if I can paraphrase it, was you outsourced, you prioritized your time, and at some point in the last 10 years or so, you started, you became the CEO of your company instead of an employee of your own company. Is that
Exactly.
fair?
Very
And
fair.
and I think that's one of the things that business owners who are just struggling, and especially ones with younger kids or even young teenagers, they struggle with that time management piece because they spend more time working for their business instead of working on their business. And
Exactly.
they can't make that leap to hire somebody to do the $10 or $15 an hour job. They think they're getting ahead by doing that $15 an hour job, and they can't figure out why they're not making $150 an hour themselves.
Very much so. And it's also impatience. I didn't have the patience to wait 10 days until the truck was picked up by a carrier and brought to me. I wanted to grab it within 3 days. I remember vividly after 9/11 that I was the guy that would call United um, on a whim in the morning and say, I'd like to fly out tomorrow from Bozeman, Montana, because I need to go to Burlington, Vermont, which is one of my stops before I'd go up into Canada or somewhere. I was tagged as a security risk for the first year, because who is this single guy buying airplane tickets on Wednesday, flying on Friday, and it's a one-way ticket? So, I mean, I must have set off all kinds of red flags. I was telling my
Yeah,
wife the other day.
I was in national defense. You hit like 4 out of 5 right there.
Yeah. And you being in national defense, remember, if you got your passport and it said SSSS on it, that was like, okay, stand by for wanding. You have been, they would say randomly selected, but I went, oh, I know better than that. I'm not that random.
Wanding and more of the bonus plan.
Yeah.
All right, so we've gone a little bit long, but this is you tremendous lessons. I got two more questions. Um, where do you see yourself in the future? You alluded to it a little bit, but nail it down so people can kind of understand where you're starting to think as you wind down looking at retirement.
I would tell them, keep your brain active. I intend to retire from the sales of ambulances, but having accrued 30 years of knowledge about product and the nomenclature and the best product features, you need to think, if you want to perform some kind of a function, much like your coaching goes on, maybe you can talk to some people and say, look, I have this. I'd be willing to put on 2 or 3 schools a year at the hotel of your choice, since you're a dealer in my 3 brands that I used to go. And I made that offer the other day, and a new businessman, somebody who's just coming into this, said, "You bet, Steve, let's do this, because I can't even." It would take 18 months for the average salesman that I would hire to start being able to talk ambulance and all of the nomenclature and all the CPR side seat, the attendance area, and so if you have an inherited wealth of knowledge and you want to stay active, there are people that are going to say, I mean, everything from, you can be a car mechanic, and if you don't want to turn wrenches anymore, you can certainly teach young people at a vocational technical school how to take out an engine. And I have lots of energy left. I just don't want to be gone from home much. So I'll be able to schedule what I do. One other thing that I learned in the last 2 years is there's a firm called Reuben Anders who hires nothing but professional expert witnesses. They have 38,000 names. It's a Baltimore, I think it's a Boston based firm. They contacted me asking me all kinds of questions about a pending court case. This was 3 years ago, involving ambulances that were not being paid for. And the financing firm wanted to know, should we sell them? Should we let the customer get his payments caught up? What that turned into is I was able to give them everything they needed. What is the value of the truck? How many of them are there? And I basically prepared a report and later testified in bankruptcy court for them that the best course for them would to work out something with the client to continue paying down them. So even though we were in federal bankruptcy court and we were in Corpus Christi, we never actually had to see the judge. But the fact that I was able to say, I'm an expert on this little niche area, and this is what I would do. They solved their case and settled with their client and paid me very well for the 4 days that I provided that information. So if you have an expertise and you don't want to work full time, remember that your 30 years of accrued knowledge or 40 years of accrued knowledge may make you an expert witness in some area. And you might get an occasional job that will give you a little something to flex your mind and give you a little bit of pocket change. But it was a good move on my part.
Yeah, you struck a nerve with me there because I was 30 plus years in the military and I retired and things were good. I lasted 90 days.
Yeah.
That was it. I only lasted 90 days and I'm like, well, this isn't working for me. I need to go and do something. I use my powers for good instead of evil.
There you go. You can only watch so much Netflix.
Yeah, and there's a lot of it out there that I just don't want to.
Yeah, me too.
Um,
Can't
so
get that hour back.
yeah, exactly. Um, Final parting shot. A one-liner of what advice would you offer an aspiring entrepreneur or the struggling entrepreneur? What's your one bit of wisdom? You passed a ton of them on, but what's the one that's most important and top of mind to you?
I would say try to remain as free thinking as possible and as independent as possible. As much as I think we probably do need corporations and we need paid salesmen, door-to-door salesmen, it's going to be the person that is willing to put in that 15-hour day and is willing to be building towards some kind of a final goal that's going to be able to say that was the right move. I made all that money myself, and now I've developed something of value that I can sell to somebody else. My business will probably sell both on the online part of my business and the fixed mortar brick and mortar part of that business will probably sell within the next 15 to 18 months, and then I will have even more freedom to do so.
So you struck another chord with me that I want to ask real quick. How long were you in business before you came to the conclusion to write a strategic plan? Because I'm guessing at some point you had a strategic plan with goals.
Yeah, even when I was on the highway patrol, I was frustrated because I couldn't get enough hours in. So I started working for private security firms doing night patrol, just because it meant another $200 a week in my pocketbook. But within 12 years, well, actually, excuse me, within 4 years of selling for a corporation, I took the internet and started my own website because that was an independent source. It would mean ad revenue every month. And at least for another 8 years, they had no issue with it. I reminded them when I was actually still selling lots of new trucks for them. But I had a plan. One plan was to be the number one biggest site on the internet in the world for the total number of ambulances sold. I think I achieved that goal. And number two, I wanted to become a limited liability corporation so that I got to see where all the money went, and I could keep track of it that way. I started an LLC in Wyoming, which later I moved to Montana, probably when I only had about maybe 4 years under the corporate structure. My LLC was what I designed so that I could register with the Secretary of State's in both deals and
Right.
makes bids on pre-owned trucks and stuff. So
When did
become a
it
limited.
become evident that you needed to write it down on paper instead of just in your head?
Yes, and spend the money to become legal. You can't just wing it and become a glorified used car salesman in this business. For me to be successful and get the big bids, which are the state government contracts, I needed to become an entity and be registered with the Secretary of State. Not that much expense at all in relation to what you can return on that. My company currently has contracts with the state of Montana to deliver 8 new ambulances in the next 20 months because we won those bids.
Fantastic.
So future revenue is there. One of the problems we're having in determining when I should retire is that I have product waiting to be finished from now, November, until actually about May of 2026. It's much like having a whole bunch of houses being built and you can sell them every month as they're finished and the sidewalks are done. But I have houses and sidewalks that won't even be finished until probably early 2026. So how do you handle that revenue stream? They're a guaranteed stream of revenue. So you have to calculate how much of that do I give to a new owner as incentive for him to work hard. So.
Yeah, sure. Well, I can't thank you enough for sharing your insights and your experience and your journey of navigating to what seems to be wildly successful. And for everybody that was watching today, I look forward to seeing you next time. Any parting shots before we sign off, Steve?
All of the lessons that I learned about ambulances, one of the most important ones is they're kind of recession proof. You hear them up and down the streets every day, and they've never gone away. If you become an RV salesman, expect to have some years where no one can afford that big motorhome. But the ambulances and the police cars that we deal with are up and down the highways every day, and they need to replace them. So that's been having a recession proof product's been exceptional. So.
One last final nugget. Not necessarily a blue ocean, but found a blue ocean market for a commodity that will endure. That's fantastic. All
Indeed.
right, we'll look forward to seeing all the folks out there on the next episode. And thank you again, Steve.